Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Rent Prep for Landlords. We got a guest here who is recommended from Tim Shiner, who, if you remember him from a previous podcast, he's like, you got to talk to this guy, Josh. He's out in Central City, Kentucky. He's got a really interesting backstory. You may have heard of him before on the Bigger Pockets podcast, and we just want to welcome you to the podcast, Josh.
All right. Thanks for having me. Yeah. Looking forward to doing this with you guys.
Yeah. So
the first thing that comes to mind, if you're listening to the podcast, you're not getting the full experience. You got to see a video. I'm sure you hear this a lot. You are like a spitting image of Keith Urban.
No. Man, I went to you. So last week, 92.5 country music station called me while I was pumping gas. And they're like, we hear you look like Keith Urban. And I let them get me some crap on the radio for a couple minutes. It was kind of fun.
That's funny.
I call it midlife crisis hair.
Yeah.
We were actually just talking about midlife crises before we got on the podcast with you.
Right. Some guys buy cars, some guys grow out their hair. You know, to each their own.
Yeah.
Right, man.
Steve might have owned a really nice Mustang at one point, you know?
Yeah.
You're a car guy, though, right?
Yeah.
You're a car guy.
It hit me hard, yeah.
Yeah, I bought my midlife crisis car was a Corvette, so yeah.
Nice. There you go.
Mine's a 2010 Nissan Altima. It's a V4, and let me tell you, it purrs. It purrs.
Nice, man.
You're 32. He's got time. He's got some time. He's gonna go through it. I know it. I know he will.
Yeah, my next car is probably a minivan, so I'm going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Well, I'm way past my midlife crisis. There's no way I'm living to see 60. No way.
Well, Josh, thanks for being on the podcast. Super interesting guest. I was really interested in what you got going on there in Kentucky, down in Central City. One of the things that I picked out from listening to other podcasts that you were on is that you pick up these rentals, and we're talking about buying these cars for midlife crises, but you pick up rentals for used car pricing. Can you talk a little bit about the market that you're in and how you've kind of built your rental industry, your rental empire?
Well, in our area, there is the rental businesses. There's more rentals now than our homeowners. I have found that a lot of people around here, a good living here is different than a good living in bigger towns. You know, if you look at our county, the average household income, it's very low. It's like $20,000, $25,000. So the houses here, I mean, rent is still all relative. You go 30 miles north of here to Owensboro, Kentucky, the third largest city by population in Kentucky. You know, a 3-bedroom house will rent for $900 to $1,000, whereas here, you know, you'll get around $600 average. But you're also buying the houses here at literally a third of the cost. So I have a lot of people are there. You drive down the road, there's for sale signs everywhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, they are literally everywhere. But
is it just people trying to get out of town, or what is it usually?
No, it's just I think a lot of the younger generation here just wants to rent. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, like the last house I bought, you know, parents had died. The house before that came with the 4 acres. The man was getting older. The daughter-in-law and son moved him into their house on their property. And, you know, so a lot of these houses I'm buying, you know, they're built in 50s, 60s, and 70s. You know, they're older houses. They're all laid out the same a lot of times, you know, and I go through and I do the same procedure of gutting them, putting new cabinets in, flooring and all that stuff. But, yeah, it's just me having as many houses as I do, it's just people are constantly calling me to come and look at their property that they need to get rid of quick and cheap.
Mm-hmm. So I thought that was real interesting too. Like, you see a lot of these guys, you know, real estate investors that, especially in our area too, you drive a 2-mile block and I don't know how many signs you'll see that says Jim buys houses, and it's got a cell phone number on the sign, you know, attached to a light post or something. It's interesting to me that you've got this passive flow coming to you of people saying, hey, I want you to buy my house. How did that happen? How does it happen that you just get people coming to you?
Man, you know what? I think it's just exposure in a small town. You know, like I said, in the printing company I've got 81 employees. So if you think about it, even with some turnover, I've got 100 and some families I'm dealing with just in the printing company. Mm-hmm. You know, and in our whole county, there's 30,000 people. So in Central City, there's 7,000. So it's just exposure, and plus having already so many rental houses, and I'm just kind of the guy that people say, call Josh and see if he's got something for rent. You see it all over Facebook. I'm getting tagged constantly. So I think it just kind of built up to be that. It hasn't always been that way.
So
I've been buying real estate since I was 31, and I'm 42, so 11 years now.
you mentioned Facebook, so you're getting tagged on Facebook for things like, I believe I've heard before that you use Facebook groups to actually market your rentals and actually fill them. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, man. When I post something online, an apartment, if I have an apartment, it is usually online in less than an hour, and it's rented.
Mm-hmm.
And 3-bedroom houses you can't find around here right now to rent. There is none. And usually, if I get one coming open, I don't even have to post it. I'm already getting calls from people seeing where they moved out, people begging to put deposits down.
Yep.
So I'll go like for sale in Muhlenberg County or for rent in Muhlenberg County, and I'll post pictures. I use Tenant Cloud, and a lot of times I'll put that listing on the free landlord website that they give you, and then I'll just take that that website address and I'll post it on Facebook and go in more detail that way. So I'm driving traffic towards that because I'm trying to get it to where, unfortunately, my cell phone number is out there and it rings off the hook.
Right.
So I have to turn it
We'll
off.
put it in the show notes if anybody wants it.
Well, I don't even answer it anymore.
Yeah.
I let it go to voicemail, and it says, if you want a T-shirt, call Central Screen Printing. If you want a rental property, I don't have any available. Or I'll say, go to the website, or call Derek, my main maintenance guy, just because it'll ring off the wall. But anyways, you was talking about the Facebook posts. Yeah. And I posted on there, and they're gone. I've never paid for advertisement since Facebook.
Yeah. Now on Facebook, are you posting them to like your page that you own for rental properties? Is it a group that you own, or did you find other people's groups that you post to?
It's other groups. I mean, I have for rent in Central City group. So because most of my properties are in Central City, I have a few in Greenville. That's about it. Because my rule of thumb is I want to be able to drive by them on the way home. So when I buy a property, that is one of my main rules of thumb. So, but anyways, now what started happening is people started posting to mine that were in that group. So it became not only my rental property, but other people's. So now I just use some of the other groups that has a lot more, members.
Sure. Yeah, that's something that because we have a Facebook group too, which a lot of our listeners that are on this podcast are in, and that's something that we kind of set up very early on, was kind of cutting off spam in it, because Facebook groups can become overridden with people just kind of trying to sell something. But I think that's awesome though that you're able to just use Facebook for that to get your rentals filled. And I think it's cool too that you have kind of like these rules set up. You said your rule of thumb as far as it's got to be on the drive home. Do you have any other kind of rules that you live by as far as when you're buying rental properties?
I mean, structurally, I want them very structurally sound. I don't care about anything cosmetic. So let me think, any other rules of thumb? Well, I never go over 45,000 on a 3-bedroom.
Yeah.
Because
we got a lot of angry listeners right now.
Yeah.
Well,
that's crazy.
The reason why. So my one of my goals when I started buying real estate was I wanted everything paid off when I was 48. Everything. So I'm 42. I'm fixing to turn 43 in December. But I will not finance anything up till last year. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So when I was 40, I would finance it for 8 years. When I was 39 years. So I would do that and because I wanted an escape somehow. I didn't want to just keep buying property and finance until I was 65 years old. Because I wanted something that was going to give me a retirement from my printing company, because I've been doing this since I was 10 yeyears old.
There's child labor laws,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was abused. It was very much abused. But my dad started the company, and I became half owner in 95.
All right.
So I've been printing a lot of T-shirts, man, in my time. And but I didn't have any retirement. So when Tim Shiner taught me into buying my first property when I was 31, and bought a couple more when I was 32. I was like, I've got to have a plan. Otherwise, I lose track of why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get bored with it, and I'll get tired of dealing with it and sticking money in it. And so I have that's helped me a lot, actually, and to keep buying property.
I think that brings up a really good point. You and me are probably cut from the same stone, man. I get bored really easy, right? I have a very short attention span.
He
Eric
does.
will tell you.
He does.
Yeah, I ran out of Adderall this morning. I got to get my prescription today.
Oh, right. You're speaking my language, man. Yeah. So you get it. I think having goals is really important because it's so easy to be like, wake up one day and be like, I'm not into this today, and want to just move to something totally different. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that vice in a lot of ways, right? Like part of what makes you great as an entrepreneur can also be a detriment to you in the long run if you don't have some goals in mind, if you don't have a long-term play that you want to make. Those things are super important. So I give you a lot of credit for recognizing that and saying, hey, I got to have, I got to have a vision on what's to come. Otherwise, I'm going to wake up one day and just say, I'm not in it anymore.
Right. Yeah. And it does, like another thing that I haven't done it the last couple of years. So what got me going for 10 years, though, was my wife. Every time I'd buy a rental house, she's always supported me, but there's that drag of keeping up with who's paid rent, who hasn't paid rent, paying utilities on some of the apartments. I mean, so, I'd have to reward ourselves somehow. So I would, when I bought a house, at first I would give her money off each house I bought. I figure in an extra $500,000, whatever, it kind of changed. But now when I buy a rental house, I book a vacation. Mm-hmm. So I'm going on a cruise in a few weeks, and it's going to be my 4th or 5th cruise this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And and we took a couple of the vacations, went to Vegas a couple times, and so now you have that short-term goal to go, you know what? I bought a house for $10,500, but what would have paid for that? I would have paid 18 or 19 easy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So figure in an extra $5,000, take a cruise for your whole family, my 4 kids.
I think it's interesting because there's financial gurus out there. I don't know if you listen to like Dave Ramsey at all. Yeah, right. So he's like gazelle intensity, like save, no debt. And it kind of seems like from what I've heard before of you talking, as far as like, I think you even pulled debt out on a home equity loan to buy more mortgage or more rental properties. And then you actually reward yourself with something like you're not getting that money back from going on a cruise, but you're getting that experience. And that's the motivation that's pushing you to keep going forward as a team.
Right. Man, I've been very blessed in my life because I've had a lot of material stuff. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, in the last 10 years, I bought a Hummer limo, I bought the vet. I bought anything I basically wanted to do, I've done.
Okay.
So
now, do you have a garage to park the Hummer limo?
I've got 3 garages. So, and I'm not, on paper, with real estate, you build wealth, right?
Yep.
In a small town, you move me to New York, and I'm actually a very poor guy. But the short-term goals is I like spending time. My son, who's my youngest, he's 11. Man, I like going on trips with him. Mm-hmm. I could get rid of everything and not even care. But it is nice knowing that when I go to Vegas and I want to blow $3,000, I go, well, thank you, 303 North 3rd Street. You paid for all that for me.
Yeah.
And my tenants are paying. That's what the whole goal is.
Yep.
Buy an asset and let it pay for your liability. The rich dad, poor dad theory, man, that changed my life. So if I can give you another example, I was in Vegas, me and my brother and my wife, we was going to be married for 21 years at the time. She wanted a new Camaro with a pink bow tie. Well, I couldn't find one with a pink bow tie, so I had it made. So while I'm in Vegas, I told my brother, I'm buying her a Camaro. And I found one that had like 3,000 miles on it. It's brand new. We got it for $30,000. So I called my banker and I said, I want to finance it for 4 years. He's like, all right. So I came straight home, went and bought a house, paid cash for it. And that rental payment paid the car payment. Mm-hmm. Now I could have done it backwards. It didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
But But in 4 years, when that car is only worth $6,000, I still got a rental house bringing in $550 a month.
Well,
Right.
I think so. You got a couple of advantages that people don't have. Like one of the obvious ones is the cost of the houses in the area that you're picking up. They're much
Sure.
lower than people are used to. But I think one of the things that people might overlook is the fact that you said you've been in business since you were 10 years old, and you've got all this experience of how to grow a team. And can you talk about how that's affected your ability to grow your rental portfolio? Because for me, like I'm a DIY guy, I'm never going to grow to 30 units doing everything myself. It'd be very difficult. But you've grown to 90 plus units, and how did that go for you? Like, what did you do?
Man, that's a key point, because in my printing company, so we were in business for 20 years before I hired my first graphic designer. I'd done all the graphic design work since I was in high school, right? So I hired my first one, put him in my office, and I critiqued him hardcore for a solid year. And then all of a sudden, then I started passing that to him. Well, I realized right then, when that was his only job and he didn't have to worry about sales and he had to worry about print quality and all that, he became a better graphic designer than I did. Mm-hmm. And I found out all of a sudden now I don't have to do graphic design work. I could sell more. And then I became my own bottleneck in sales. So now I got 15 salespeople. And so now I just sit back and I manage it, which is still tough. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. I had supervisor meetings every day. So I took the same philosophy to the rental business. I went through several construction crews before, constantly trying people out. I mean, they did a good job, but it wasn't until I had 10 properties that allowed me to hire a maintenance man full time. But by having him, I knew I was freed up. Now I could buy more property and not get a divorce, because I have to go work on some real estate.
Sure.
So, but now I've got a crew. I've got a guy who can do plumbing, that does electrical, heat and air, that does full construction, and I've got a maintenance guy that does piddly stuff. And by having that crew, my expenses is a lot and my labors went up, but I'm buying a house every 4 to 5 weeks right now. Mm-hmm. And those move-in ready houses are gone in our area. They're just gone. Used to, when I first started doing it, you could buy a $36,000 house and you just throw a rent on it of $475 to $500 and rent it the next day. But those are gone. So like I'm buying a house. Like I bought one, you won't believe this. It's a 2-bedroom. It's got enough square footage to make it a 3rd bedroom, which we're going to do. But I went and looked at it. It was a guy, an Indian man who owned dry cleaners, and he sold that business. He's moving out of town. And I bought this house from him for $4,800. Now the normal guy would walk in and go, "Oh my God, look at the drywall's got holes all in it." I love them like that.
Yeah.
So I take my construction crew in, and in 3 days he backs his dump truck up. We've got it gutted, and I got guys doing wiring, and then we're redoing the plumbing, and then we're just putting it all back. It's like clockwork. I mean, we do the same thing over and over again. Mm-hmm. So right now I was figuring my costs and where I'm going to be at on it. I'm probably going to have $25,000 in it, mm-hmm, in addition to it. So $30,000 for a brand new house. And I know, and it's kind of cookie cutter. So the appraisal is going to come back probably around $75,000-$80,000. And I'll have the choice then to pull all my money back out, the $30,000, or leave it and just have free and clear $600 a month coming in.
Wow.
At least I have options.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy. I think really an important takeaway for landlords to be listening to is if you do want to scale, and if you're a real estate investor and you've got this plan to build this real estate empire, you can't do it alone. You got to have a trusted group, a crew that you've built, and it may not be the first guy you hire. It may not be the second or third guy you hire, but you do it enough and you find the right people, and then it just starts to click, right? Then all of a sudden, everything, you're clipping along and you're like, wow, this is a game changer. And
you bonus them when they do things good. It's not always about getting mad and because a guy shows up late one day. I mean, I have learned that in that business, you can't be as hardcore as I can on my sales team here at Central Screen Printing. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is. You're going to have to reward them when they do good and kind of act like you believe them when they call in sick one day and you see on Facebook they're out catfishing.
Now, is that catfishing like they're fishing, or they're like going to end up on an MTV show?
More like catfishing and drinking a lot of beer.
Yeah.
Steve, do you remember what that video was called that we watched? Maybe you'll know this, Josh, where it's like something they do in like Arkansas, and they put their arm into the catfish hole.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
noodling.
That's right.
Yeah, that's intense. We'll try if I can remember. I'll put a noodling video on the show notes of this episode, and you will not forget it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. I don't want any part of that. But yeah, super interesting to me, the parallels, and really to see. It's funny, we talked to a lot of successful real estate investors, but you do a really great job of kind of putting the pieces together and piecing it together and saying this is how it happened, and this is your experience from your screen printing business and just running a company and understanding this is how it goes. And I think every business owner, I'm sure every real estate investor, comes to that point where they realize I can't do this by myself, and then they do hire that one guy that they see and say, wow, this guy's doing a better job than I could have done, and now that gives me time to focus on these other things. And that's truly how you scale anything, right?
Yeah, and you got to run it like a business. In other words, you can't accept when your main guy comes and says, here's a bill for this week in labor, $4,500. I give them time cards. I want to know when they clock in, when they clock out for lunch, what they done that day. When they go to Met's or Menards and buy something, I want it on the bottom of it. I want the receipt. I hold them accountable. So they're not stealing plumbing supplies from me to do another job. I've had that happen. So you just got to be diligent. You're not going to catch every little thing. Does one of them take a sheet of plywood home with them or half a sheet and they need it, and I got to stack outside? It may or may not happen. But I look at big picture. How much equity am I building a month or a year? I'm not one of these guys who freaks out when I go in, there's a spot of oil or something they spilled on my carpet. I go, you know what? I'm not putting carpet in anymore. I'm going to do LVT, or I want to do, tile or whatever. I learned to just limit my losses.
Yeah.
And, because it's going to happen.
Sure.
And I would trade $4,000 a year in equity for $100 piece of carpet all day long.
You seem like a bigger fish, or a big fish in a smaller pond, who's very long-term focused,
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, the people around me, my town's been good to me. I have a lot of friends. So there's a lot of good people that need rentals here. A lot of people make good money. Just their credit's horrible. So it's, and I have found that if you're good to people, and you keep your places, you don't turn into a slumlord. Like if somebody's air goes out, I'm fixing it.
Yeah.
If their roof is leaking, I'm fixing it, man. I'm not going to let a $3,000 or $4,000. That's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. But when it needs a new roof, do it now, because you're going to have to do it a year from now anyways.
Right.
So you might as well put it on now and get better tenants and people who are going to take care of your property.
Yeah. It reminds me, I had a friend in high school that I'd argue with all the time. And he never wanted to fill up his tank of gas completely. He'd always fill it up halfway. And he's like, oh, I'm saving money. And I'm like, no, you're not. If anything, you're losing money. And that's kind of what you're describing is like, yeah, you might save a couple $100 by putting off that roof for another year because you're getting one more year of use out of that roof. But unless you're planning on selling that place in 6 months, you just take care of it and get it done and not have to deal with it.
Now, I know there's going to be some people that's going to say, I don't have $4,000 in the bank extra, but my deals, my money's made, excuse me, my money's made a lot of times in the purchase. So like I was saying, if you're buying a property for $10,500 and my crew is doing $10,000 worth of labor, where the normal Joe is going to be out $30,000 if they went and hired a crew. And so if I got 25 in it, I've got 40 or 50 grand in equity. And so I got a $150,000 line of credit at the bank. So worst case scenario, I just and I got enough money coming in now where I built it up to where that $3,000 or $4,000, I don't like to spend it. Don't get me wrong, but if it needs it, all I'm doing is making my property more valuable anyways. And I'm getting a tax write-off for it. And, the tenants are paying for it.
Right.
They are paying for it.
Now, I thought you brought up an interesting point. You got a lot of properties and you're using Tenant Cloud to sort of self-manage those properties. So tell us a little bit about that, about how you're using Tenant Cloud. And I know we spoke before we even jumped on air about background checks. So just give us kind of a full spectrum there of what you're doing with a platform like Tenant Cloud and maybe running background checks or credit checks or not.
Yeah. Well, I have been looking for years for a good app that would be cloud-based. The reason I wanted cloud-based was the problem I was having is people typically will come in my printing a shop. They walk in and I got salespeople out there and they take their rent money. So they would take the rent money, they turn it into a certain spot. Nobody mails it in. Everybody brings it in, even though they had the option. So, or let's say the maintenance guy's out working on a property and one of the elderly ladies say, hey, Derek, can I give you my money? So he's got rent. My wife's got the rent up front, or I'll be out and somebody see me at IGA and say, hey, Josh, here's the rent, by the way. So I needed something. I kept it all in spreadsheet for a long time. And it's nice to be able to look at it in front of you. But being cloud-based, my wife, she can literally, she's got it on her desktop. She's got the app on an iPad or iPhone. She just marks it paid, any notes, and we all get it. Or let's say the maintenance guy gets a phone call. He's underneath the house, working on something, and somebody texts him and says, hey, I got a leak on this or whatever. So now they use Tenant Cloud. I'm connected with them. They can go on that app and actually request a maintenance issue that needs to be fixed. And he sees it. I get it. So now if he forgets to tell me about it, because in the mornings I give them work orders of what to do that day or that week, typically. I got one guy that I'll give it to him. He delegates it. So, but now we can see it all in one spot.
Right.
And it'll tell you when it's in progress. They can request what day they want you there. Do they want to give you permission to enter in that day? Is there a pet? Now, we don't allow pets in any of our rental properties, by the way, which limits a lot of tenants that want to rent. Probably cuts it probably over in half.
Sure.
But anyways, Tenant Cloud is now starting January 1. We are going to be receiving payments online. We do not use the background check service yet, but
those guys are garbage anyways.
Whatever.
No, well, I'm interested in that though. So if anyone's listening and they're familiar with the Tenant Cloud service, RentPrep, where the service runs the background checks, how have you done your screening up to this point and you're not doing the background checks? Like, how does it work in your area?
So thank God for Facebook.
Yeah.
And so I can get a really good idea of what somebody's life is like, especially when they're on Facebook bashing their current landlord.
Yep.
It's a no rent.
I remember one time I did a speaking engagement, a bunch of landlords, and we were talking about Facebook, and one landlord made a point, and he goes, well, what if they set their profile to private and you can't see anything? I go, that's the kind of person you're looking for. It's the ones that don't set it to private, that say all this crazy stuff, that don't have that understanding that they look crazy and everyone can see this. Those are the people you got to stay 1,000 feet from. You can't go near those folks. So I give you a lot of credit. I've said for a long time, I think Facebook is a great pre-screening tool of should you or should you not even have any conversations with this person. If they don't have it together enough to know that certain things should be kept private or certain things shouldn't be made public, you don't need to waste your time with them.
Right, and get up and walk outside and look at their car.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If it's got crap all in the back seat.
Yeah.
That's what your living room's going to look like.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a great point when, as a renter, their most valuable asset is their vehicle. So how are they treating that? How are they going to treat your asset? So yeah, it's a great point.
Josh, so if anyone's listening and they're from a more rural town where maybe the prices are more in line with what you're kind of suggesting, like, and they're just kind of getting started, let's say they got like 1 unit, 2 units, like from your experience, what advice would you give a person like that if they're really trying to grow their business?
Get a line of credit if possible, because cash is king. That's why I get a lot of good deals, because they know I'm going to close. I'm going to get a title opinion by attorney. Mm-hmm. Typically, if there's no big issue, 3 days. and he's got my deed, and I'm closing right then. So if you have a line of credit, you can write a check real quick. And also, if you put your labor in it, a lot of times if you buy something for 10 grand and the bank, you say, okay, I'm done now, and you've got 30 grand in it, let's say, and you tell the bank, hey, I want to convert this over to a mortgage. Well, they get an appraisal. They're going to loan you 80% of the appraisal. So if the appraisal comes back at 70 grand, they're going to loan you 56,000. Now you've got 30 in it. So you got 26 grand to play with. You can use that to go buy another property. So again, I have to stress, the money is made in the purchase. And you've got to know, have an idea of what it's going to cost you. When I walk into a place and I make an offer, I can look in 5 minutes and tell you about, I can be within a couple grand of what I'm going to have in a complete remodel. So as long as the roof is good, if the roof is not good, that's a little bit more of a, sketchy guesstimate on my end. And so I know a metal roof, I know what I'm going to have in the metal, but I don't know about, if I got to tear off any of the sheeting or things like that. Right. But other than that, if I look at the central heat and air unit, so the roof and the air unit is my two biggest costs. Everything else, I know what my cost is. I know what I can sheetrock a house for. With my crew, they go in, they can knock it out. I can do probably 1,000 square foot house, sheetrock and off around $2,500 to sheetrock, and which is probably half of what somebody else would have in it.
Sure.
If they hired the crew to come in.
Now, you mentioned too that how quickly you can close on deals, because I'm just remembering this. My brother actually bought a home in Kentucky, and that was one of the things that amazed him, was that here in New York it takes you about 60 days to close on a house. What are you averaging out there in Kentucky?
Are you talking about if I finance?
Yeah.
If I finance, about 30 days.
30 days? Okay. I just remember him saying it took like 2 weeks with financing or something like that when he was there.
Well, the thing is with me, the way I buy property now, it was 30 days the old school way. The way I do it now with my line of credit, I mean, with a $150,000 line of credit, I can have 3 or 4 houses going all the time.
Yeah.
And it just, I like the line of credit because it just helps me keep up with everything. So if you heard my other podcasts I done, one property I did, I bought, I had a house and I was using that line of credit. And then I took my family on a cruise. It was like $9 grand, $8 grand, somewhere in there. So I paid for that with the line of credit. And when I financed that house, I financed it all together. So that property, I ended up financing about, and I'm trying to remember all the numbers, but I think I ended up financing around $42,000. And still, the tenant, it's still going to be paid off when I'm 48.
Yep.
And I'm 42, so the tenant is paying for my cruise. I'm out $0 for my family. And like I said, it's my 4th or 5th cruise this year. So every time I buy a property, I figure it in, and man, I take my family on vacation. And so now they love it. My wife loves it now when I buy property.
I'm glad my wife doesn't listen to a lot of these podcasts.
Yeah, right. No, you got the right idea though. I mean, that is you got to reward yourself, right? You got to celebrate the wins. You got to do all those things to make it worthwhile. And I think you're doing that. I think that's awesome.
And you know what? I tell a lot of people too, when you're buying gasoline, I'm in a 30-something% tax bracket. I always ask people when they say, why do you do it? If a gallon of gas is $2, I always ask people, how much is a gallon of gas? They say $2. I go, no, if you're in a 20% tax bracket, you're paying about $2.50 a gallon, because you got to make $2.50 to clear $2 after taxes to buy a gallon of gas.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm in a 30% tax bracket, it's costing me about $1.40 or something like that, just 30% off, because I pay for it pre-tax dollars.
Right.
So being in a rental business, it helps me plan for my retirement, gives me tax incentives, tax shelter there. And I don't know, man, it pays for my vacations. Heck, I don't know why everybody doesn't have a bunch of real estate.
It's about retirement, vacations, enjoying life now. I mean, those are really the main things people want to check off the list,
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife didn't talk to me for a few days because I bought 3 houses in one day. But I had to hurry up and do it. And I'm like, hey, babe, I need you to go to the bank and sign. Because she does the majority of this, right? So she does all the financing, and I help out on the maintenance side of it. Because she is the managing member of this LLC because I run Central Screen Printing. So I'm like, I made the offer. Now you got to take care of it. And she's like, Josh, I got to be more informed of this stuff. And I'm like, hey, it worked on the first 60. It's going to work on 3 more.
Yeah.
So just keep on buying them, man.
It's not broke. Don't fix it.
Right. Yeah. At what point are you going to trust me? I know what I'm doing here. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I love it.
That's awesome.
So the good thing is, like, I'm starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. So next year, I've got a lot of our mortgages going to be paid off because I financed them a lot for 10 and 12 years when I first started buying. So knowing, I've got enough equity right now that I was just telling her the other day, we got enough equity that I could sell property and pay off enough that I could retire right now easily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And knowing you have that option takes a lot of stress away, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Tim Shiner told me something when I was younger. He said, Josh, 10 years is going to fly by, whether you own real estate or not. He said, I'm telling you, you're going to turn around and you're going to be 10 years older and wish you would have bought it. And that's why I started buying. And I am so glad I did.
I got a question as far as maybe not specifically your relationship with Tim, but so did he come into your life because he was involved with the screen printing business?
Yes.
So
yes.
So did he know your dad and then he started kind of mentoring you, or you guys met first?
No, I've been the president of the company. I've been running the company for the majority, probably the last 15 years.
Gotcha.
So Tim, he had a Go Logo, a promotional company, and they needed somebody to do their printing on the apparel side, the textile printing. So one of his sales ladies called me, and then he flew up from Dallas, and I met him. He found out I was a Cowboys fan, and he flew me to Dallas for a game.
Okay.
And we became really good friends, and now we hang out. We go all over. We'll travel and go to Green Bay and watch the Cowboys play, and
Vegas.
So we're just really good friends. Vegas, yeah, we had a lot of fun.
So is he somewhat of a mentor to you though, as far as real estate?
Absolutely.
So what would you tell somebody if they're listening? They don't have a mentor. Like, what has it done for you as far as learning the ins and outs and just kind of growing that part of your life?
As far as you're talking about
getting a mentor, somebody that can help you.
Well, what it does, he reaffirms what I know. So when I second guess myself, like, man, I'm buying a $450,000 apartment building, and you got to pay down $80,000 or $90,000, out of your savings. And then you start going, am I doing the right thing? Is this going to sink me? But when you're talking to Tim, and he always has encouraged me. And I'll tell you one thing that I did. The deal didn't go through, but Tim gave me some great advice on. He said it was a real estate deal. This gentleman was getting older, and he fell off a ladder, got hurt, and he had a lot of real estate. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give him an out. I'm going to make him a good offer where he can make 8% on his money. He'll have money coming in. He's 60 years old. He'll have money coming in the rest of his life, and I'll give him a big chunk of money down. I made the offer $1.8 million on a real estate deal. And it was the biggest one at the time I'd ever, put an offer out there. And I was a nervous wreck that he would even accept it. But Tim, he said, Josh, I'm going to tell you, he said, even if they don't accept it, he's like, you're going to realize at that point, that wasn't such a big deal after all. And he's right. And after that, it changed. That really was a turning point, even in my printing company, because when I started venturing outside of small town, when you're very small town minded, it makes you realize, you know what? Buying a $100,000 screen printer, automatic screen printer, it's the next step into being bigger and growing wealth. Yeah. So I can nitpick and buy $20,000 houses here and there, but it's nice when when I buy a guy who properties that's got 7 properties. It doesn't. So when I made that big offer, it just changed me. I'm like, you know what? It's not a big deal anymore.
What kind of took your baseline of like what you're willing to accept and just kind of moved it up a little bit, and then suddenly just kind of expanded what your fear tolerance was, pretty much.
Absolutely. And you know what I've become immune to is large numbers. Yeah. Because there's a lot of times I got so many jobs going on, 3 or 4 or 5 projects at once. I mean, you could go in Lowe's, you may owe Lowe's $20,000, Met's $10,000, and you may have, $40,000 coming in and rent right then. You're thinking, man, I got money that it can leave real quick.
Yeah.
So those big numbers honestly, just money comes and goes. So I'm like, you know what? Just keep making offers and try to keep a hold on the reins a little bit. Watch your money.
Yeah. I deal with that. I have a real problem with reality and money sometimes. Sometimes there's a real blurred line there where you're just used to seeing big numbers. And there's like this, okay, in business, that's not a big deal. In the personal life, that's a huge deal. That's a lot of money. So, yeah, I know what you mean there. You sort of become immune to it or adjust to it. And then, like you said, buying a $100,000 screen printer doesn't seem like a big deal because that makes sense. That's the natural next step, what you got to do.
Right. And then you go, well, how much money is that printer going to make me per hour, weekly or monthly? And when you look at it that way, you go, you know what? I just spent $40,000 on a house that's bringing $500 a month. So I got a friend in Atlanta, same thing. He makes microphone stands for rock stars. I mean, pretty nice. As a matter of fact, I got pictures of him hanging up. I don't know if you can see it on the wall. We're going to be hanging out tomorrow night. So anyways, he was talking about getting a machine. He needs it to get where he can fabricate, these mic stands faster. But when you look at your time, you look at how much money you can make, it only makes sense to buy it and hurry up because you only live one time.
Yeah.
I always hear people say, well, when I get my finances in order, when I get this, when I get that, I'm going to buy a house. And there's no good time. It's kind of like having a baby. Everybody says, when I get everything in order, just have the kid. It works out.
Yeah.
Just have it.
That's what they say. I got a 2-month-old, so I'm working through that.
Right.
Yeah, I got 4 of myself, man.
Yeah.
And it's, rental properties, put them through college. My daughter's actually going to be a real estate appraiser, and she's a property manager as well. So
cool.
She's seen how much I was paying for some of these commercial properties.
Very cool. Well, Josh, thank you for being on the podcast. Just so much knowledge and insight, and it's just really interesting your market and how you've used that as an asset for taking money from your business and buying rental properties. And I just feel like there's so much knowledge to share with our listeners. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I appreciate kind words and wish everybody the best too. Thank you.
Take care.
Awesome.